morning sunlight streams through the white columns of the United States Naval Academy. I, Eva Morgan, 34, a Navy intelligence officer, stand at the gated entrance of the medal ceremony for my brother, heart pounding against the metal rails. Each beat echoes like an alarm bell in my ears. The brass fanfare blares overhead as uniformed sailors snap to attention under the blazing sun. Guests line the walkway, their medals gleaming, voices hushed in anticipation. My dress uniform collar feels stiff, damp with sweat, the salty scent of perspiration mixing with starch. Time slows down. I visualize each second dripping like blood from a timer. A crisp white envelope slips from a nearby hand, fluttering to the ground before me. The bold script reads, "For a moment you will never forget." My pulse spikes with memories of dismissive glances and half-given whispers. I clench my fist, jaw set against the roar of self-doubt. I vow right then, beneath those grand columns, that no tear will betray me. I am Eva Morgan. I grew up under the endless summer sky of Annapolis, Maryland, where the scent of charred briquettes and tangy barbecue sauce clung to the warm air every Labor Day weekend. I remember the day my brother, Noah, received his acceptance packet from USNA like it was yesterday. My mom, Susan Morgan, stood at the picnic table in our backyard, a spatula in one hand and a stainless steel platter of half-burnt burgers in the other. She plastered on a nervous grin as the grease-lashed flames leaped at her. My dad, David, chuckled behind his sunglasses, swatting playfully at the smoke with a faded blue towel that had seen better days. I had just come inside from the garage, where I'd been tinkering with my homemade VR headset prototype, when I heard their laughter. They were so excited about Noah's achievement, his neatly pressed uniform-like blazer, the crimson gold ribbon on his lapel, the confident grin he wore like armor that I couldn't bring myself to interrupt. After all, I had won the regional science fair that spring with my proposal for a compact drone-based reconnaissance system. But when I stepped out carrying my ribbon and a stack of lab notes, their eyes barely flickered in my direction before returning to Noah. I tucked my accomplishments into my backpack and slipped away, the smell of burning meat and sticky sweet sauce fading behind me. That afternoon, the backyard was a chaotic theater of celebration. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows for the neighbors, string lights already draped between the maple trees, and mason jars of sweet tea sweating on the picnic table. Mom had tried her famous pumpkin pie that year, a tradition she declared risk-free every October, but instead delivered what our family still calls the Great Pumpkin Debacle. A lumpy, undercooked slab that wobbled like jelly whenever you sliced it. Dad cut through it anyway and winked at me as he handed me a shaky wedge, crumbs tumbling down my lab coat. I laughed, spat out a clump of half-baked crust, and raised my glass to Noah, to the next naval officer in the family. That toast felt hollow. Inside, I carried a secret pride in my experiments that I couldn't share. My custom VR rig, built from scavenged circuit boards and a pair of ski goggle lenses, could project three-dimensional mission maps that I couldn't share. I'd tested it in simulated kidnappings of toy soldiers on my bedroom floor, timing myself with a stopwatch propped on a stack of physics textbooks. That afternoon, I slipped Noah a pair of those goggles as a joke gift. When he put them on, his eyebrows shot up in surprise, and he stumbled backwards, nearly tripping over a garden hose. He yanked them off and tossed them aside, laughing. "Thanks, sis, but I prefer reality." Reality, I thought, was exactly what I was building my life around. Intelligence work at sea, gathering data where stealth was everything. But in that backyard, my world glowed red and orange under the grill's flare. A stray spark from the coals had scorched the hem of my lab jacket, leaving a tiny blackened hole I covered with a fabric bandage. By the time the sun dipped below the treetops, neighbors had left, the music box of cicadas humming, and my family stood under the maple's long shadows. Noah held his acceptance letter like a trophy, and I unclipped my science fair ribbon, letting it dangle from my fingers. Over the years, those backyard barbecues became our annual performance. Dad manning the grill, Mom cycling through her pie experiments, Noah beaming at every newcomer who congratulated him. I would find myself in the garage or the attic, rifle through drone schematics or encrypted comms manuals, tinkering alone so I could present my findings the next morning. Once, after a particularly intense week of training drills, I surprised my parents with a printed report on cryptologic protocols I'd developed. I spread my charts and data printouts across the kitchen island, only to have Dad fling a dirty dish towel over them while Mom ushered me out. Noah's graduation is next week, let's focus on that. Whenever I visit, I still catch that undercurrent of affectionate rivalry that feels more like a current pulling me under. I'll see my old bedroom where threadbare maps hang on the walls, my prototype drone parts tucked under the shelf. In the corner, the two framed photos of us as toddlers, matching pigtails and blonde curls, identical freckles across our noses, stare back at me. We were inseparable then, adventuring through that same backyard, making mud pies, pretending the sandbox was enemy territory. But somewhere between preschool and the academy, our worlds diverged. My first real taste of appreciation came during my deployment on the USS Guardian. I devised a route mapping algorithm that reduced fuel consumption by 6% over a 2-week patrol. No small feat when the vessel's daily fuel bill hovered around $30,000. The flagship's captain lauded my initiative over the ship's PA system. I replayed his words in my head for weeks. Lieutenant Morgan's innovation saved us thousands. That's the Navy's future, right there. But the praise didn't carry home. When I finally called, Mom congratulated me in a clipped tone, then asked how Noah's mock drill went for his first-year summer cruise. I've carried that memory into every promotion, every mission brief, every late-night watch under the stars. I remember the steady hum of the engine room when I cracked my first code that foiled a mock cyber attack. I felt like I was untangling a web of lies that could cost lives. Then, in the quiet after the engines shut down, as salt spray misted the deck, I tugged my collar tighter and thought of the Morgan family barbecue, where the smell of smoke and laughter still mingled with something that tasted like regret. Looking back now, I realize those early Labor Day celebrations taught me resilience. While my accomplishments quietly gathered dust in the corners of the backyard, I honed my craft in silence and solitude. I built systems and wrote code that no one outside the Pentagon would ever see. And with each deployment, I carried with me the memory of half-burnt burgers and wobbly pumpkin pie. A reminder that recognition sometimes comes late, if at all, and that the truest validation must come from within. By the time Noah marched across the graduation stage at Annapolis, his shoulders squared, head high under that peaked cap, I was already in flight plans for my first intel assignment in the South China Sea. He flashed me a triumphant grin when I saluted him from the stands, but I could see the surprise in his eyes when I returned it with equal pride. In that moment, under the arcing white columns and the roar of applause, something shifted. It wasn't the cheers of the crowd or the flash of cameras, it was my own heartbeat steadying, anchored not by the spotlight, but by the strength I found in my quiet victories. And so I carry those flavors, the smoky tang of charred burgers, the sweet tang of lumpy pumpkin pie, the electric thrill of unspoken achievement with me every day. They remind me that my story is built not on grand gestures in a backyard, but on the diligent work behind the scenes, where no one notices until the mission is done. That is where I first found my true compass. Not in family accolades, but in the hidden triumphs that shaped me into the intelligence arm I am today. I first sensed the undercurrent of contempt during a routine debrief in the intelligence center. We'd just returned from a 10-day cruise in the South China Sea, where I'd led a small team to intercept illicit smuggler communications. My tactical routing algorithm saved the fleet an estimated $150,000, 0 cents in diverted fuel costs, and the captain publicly acknowledged my contribution on the ship's secure channel. I'd even received a modest $3,500, 0 cents mission bonus, proof I thought that my work mattered. Yet when I walked into the packed operations room, all I got was indifference. Lieutenant Harris glanced away mid-sentence, and Ensign Lee tapped his tablet, eyes fixed on the latest logistics update. No congratulations, no well done, Lieutenant Morgan. I swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile as I stowed my case. The room's fluorescent lights buzzed above, each hue a reminder that my achievements were invisible. A few days later, I accepted an invite to Noah's tactical demonstration on the flight deck. He'd led a simulated fast roping exercise, clearing 5 hostile targets in under 4 minutes, and everyone in blue and white came out to watch. I joined the circle of onlookers, crisp dress blues immaculate despite the midday heat. As Noah leapt from the helicopter skid and landed perfectly, the assembled officers erupted in cheers. He pumped his fist triumphantly. I joined the applause, heart swelling for him. But beneath the claps, I heard the whispers. "That's him, the sea dog. She's not even on deck duty, all intel and no action." My cheeks burned. I remembered my own boarding ops debrief a month earlier, where I'd outlined interception points that thwarted a potential arms shipment, yet no one lined up to watch my report. No banners, no brass band. That evening, at my own modest homecoming gathering in the barracks lounge, I pulled up a chair at a small table where I'd invited peers to review my latest operational model. I had data slides, heat maps of pirate route, flowchart of encrypted channels, cost-benefit breakdowns all ready on my tablet. Lieutenant Alvarez glanced over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow, then turned back to his drink. He said, "Nice graphics, Morgan, but can't you just let the tactical guys handle that math?" My fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. "Intel guides operations," I said through gritted teeth. He shrugged. "Just don't drown us in slides next time." I left my tablet open on the table, the glow of my schematics reflecting on the polished hardwood. The lounge's muted jazz scratched through the speakers. No one asked questions. No one offered critique. No one cared. At the end of that week, I awoke to a note slipped under my cabin door. "Go prove you're more than a suit." The handwriting was scrolled, the words underlined twice. I recognized Lieutenant Carter's style. He'd lost his temper at my last tactical suggestion. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. The next day, I decided to confront the bias head-on. At the morning briefing, I asked to present my repostulated risk matrix for the upcoming joint exercise. The operations officer, Commander Russell, glanced at my name on the agenda and said, "We'll cover that offline, Morgan. Right now, we need to finalize the boarding's team roster." He motioned toward the door. I felt as if he'd swatted me aside. I swallowed hard, took a slow breath, and stood my ground. "Commander, the matrix directly affects team safety. I request permission to present now." The room grew still. Officers in dress white shifted in their seats. Commander Russell's jaw tightened. After the roster lieutenant. His dismissal landed like a physical blow. My face flushed. I nodded, turned, and sat back down. The briefing moved on without a hitch. My slide deck sat at the lectern, 10 pages of color-coded maps and contingency flags, untouched. That afternoon on the tarmac, I found Noah polishing the hull of a transport helicopter, his cheeks rosy under the sun. He grinned when he saw me. "Hey sis, saw you weren't at the briefing." He wiped his hands. "Don't sweat it, they always rush past intel stuff." I forced a laugh. "It's just sometimes I wonder if they think I'm safe behind a desk." His face fell. "Morgan, you're saving lives just as much as they are." He paused, then shrugged. "I'll put in a good word." I nodded, but the knot in my chest didn't ease. That night, I lay awake in the darkened cabin, replaying every slight. The ignored debrief, the offhand jibes, the curt dismissals. My uniform creases felt heavier than any gear I'd carried on deck. The next morning, I strode into the intelligence center with renewed purpose. I set up an encrypted link, live streaming my risk matrix to every command post in the exercise network. By midday, commanders aboard 3 different vessels reported flawlessly executed interdiction drills, each precisely where my blue zones had predicted. My terminal chimed with alert after alert. Exercise success, optimal fuel consumption achieved, threat neutralized safely. Still, when I reported to the center, the room was empty, everyone in the field praising Noah's fast roping results over the radio. I closed my laptop, fingers dancing over the keyboard to compile my full after-action report. As I hit send, I felt a cold electricity. To be seen, I would have to illuminate myself, not wait for their recognition. I walked out of the center, head held high, knowing the first cracks of bias had exposed a greater truth. The real battle wasn't fought on deck or behind screens. It was in earning respect for the silent work that underpinned every success. And I was ready for the fight. The Medal of Skill and Dedication ceremony unfolded under an azure sky, rows of immaculate uniforms and gleaming ribbons reflecting the July sun. I stood off to the side, chest tight, adrenaline still thrumming from the hours before. Noah Morgan had earned his commission second in his class, recipient of the Captain's Cup for leadership. And I had every reason to beam. But pride feels hollow when a current of betrayal cuts beneath the surface without warning. The program began with solemn brass fanfare. The commandant's voice echoed across the parade ground as he methodically called out achievements. Combat readiness awards, rescue citations, tactical excellence honors. Each name drew polite applause, each medal a testament to sacrifice. I watched Noah ascend the dais with that familiar, confident stride, cap brim low over his determined eyes. My heart swelled at his accomplishment, but even then, a sliver of doubt nudged at the edges of my thought. When he reached the microphone, the crowd hushed. I expected him to offer humble thanks, to speak of teamwork or the values instilled at Annapolis. Instead, he flashed me a casual grin and said, "Before I go on, I want to acknowledge those behind the scenes, those who stay buried in the paperwork while we real sailors get our hands dirty." A few voices chuckled uncomfortably. "Yes," he continued, sweeping his gaze across the audience, "I'm talking about the intel officers, the ones who never leave the stacks of papers to face the real action we're paid to conduct." A cold jolt shot through me. Stacks of papers. The words echoed like gunshots in my chest. Gasps rippled through officers in crisp whites and blues. I felt my uniform collar tighten, each ribbon suddenly feeling like a noose. My fists clenched at my sides as humiliation surged, hot and fierce. Behind me, I heard the commandant clear his throat. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled cough came out. Rear Admiral Christopher Walker, seated a few rows back, exchanged a terse glance with Colonel Sanders. Their eyes conveyed stunned disbelief. This was unprecedented. Noah's smirk deepened, clearly relishing the shock. An awkward silence followed. Then polite, hesitant applause stuttered through the crowd, more of a reflex than genuine praise. I saw Ensign Lee cast a quick sideways glance at me, eyes flickering with embarrassment. Lieutenant Harris shifted uncomfortably on his heels. No one knew what to do. No one wanted to catch Noah's ire by speaking up. I felt something break inside. Betrayal by blood cut the deepest. He had chosen my most public moment to belittle every covert operation I'd led, every encrypted channel I'd tapped, every risk matrix I'd calculated that saved lives. For a fleeting heartbeat, I pictured all those missions, the smuggler interdictions, the rescue coordinates, the decoded chatter that prevented ambushes. All of it reduced to stacks of papers. Noah stepped away from the microphone and straightened his cap, as if his performance were complete. The commandant regained his composure, signaling the band to resume the trumpets. The ceremony moved on, but the damage had been done. I remained frozen, knowing that those whispered jabs would resonate far longer than any medal ceremony. After the ceremony, plates of cold chicken and potato salad were set out under a canvas tent. Family and friends clustered under folding chairs, laughing and congratulating Noah. My parents beamed, tears glistening in Susan's eyes as she patted David's hand. I approached hesitantly, hoping to find support. Before I could speak, Dad's eyes slid past me. "Come sit, Noah," he said, voice heavy with pride. "Let's toast to your future." Mom offered me a weak smile and an awkward pat on the shoulder, then turned back to their son. I stood alone, the scent of grass and grilled burgers swirling in the summer air. I watched Noah sip lemonade and field congratulations. A few of his classmates, Ensign Reynolds, Lieutenant Carter, clapped him on the back, still chuckling about his joke. Not one of them spared a glance in my direction. My vision blurred with unshed tears. I caught sight of my reflection in a car window, uniform flawless, posture rigid. I took a steadying breath and calmed the tremor in my fingers. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. He noticed me then, his smirk shifting into something colder. He stalked over, hand shoved into his pocket. "Enjoying the party, sis?" he drawled, tone deceptively casual. I met his gaze, jaw set. "Your celebration, maybe," I replied quietly. His grin faltered for the briefest instant, eyebrows arching. "Careful, Morgan," he said, voice low. "Don't get lost behind your desk while the real work's out here." He turned on his heel and walked back to the group, leaving his words echoing behind him. My chest tightened further, a vice squeezing my lungs. How could he be so callous? We had shared bunk beds as toddlers, mud pies beside that old oak tree. We'd scrambled up maple trunks together. Now he betrayed me in front of everyone I'd worked so hard to earn respect from. Anger flared. I stormed away from the tent, boots crunching on gravel. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. I reached the shadowed edge of the parade grounds and dragged in a trembling breath. My knuckles whitened as I dialed Rear Admiral Walker's secure line on my phone. Each ring amplified the morning's sting. Finally he answered. "Lieutenant Morgan." His tone was courteous, concerned. "Sir," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my throat. "I request an immediate briefing with you to review 3 operational deployments: South China Sea, Gulf Interdiction, Caribbean Rescue. I'll forward all my reports, metrics, and evidence of results. I want this review scheduled within 72 hours. He was silent. Then, "Very well, send me your documents. I'll make arrangements." His words were brisk, professional, but behind them I sensed gravity. I ended the call and pocketed the phone. After a moment, resolve settled in me like steel. Noah's public slight was a dagger, but I would turn his deception into motivation. He wanted to frame me as a paper pusher. I would prove that every stack of papers was a cornerstone of maritime safety, coast to coast. I returned to the ceremony tent just as the last of the guests dispersed. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the columns gold. I straightened my cap and walked back to where Noah stood, surrounded by admirers. I met his gaze without flinching. He recoiled, surprise flickering across his features. Then he turned away. I stepped onto the parade ground, each stride echoing in the quiet. That night, I drafted my briefing memorandum, compiling data on fuel savings, interdiction success rates, lives protected, budget impact $1,200,000. 0 cents saved across 3 deployments, 7 vessels recovered, 15 lives rescued. I attached compressed archives of encrypted chatter decoding, drone wreckage footage, calibrated threat assessment. Tomorrow, I would step into the Admiral's office, not as a sister in his shadow, but as an officer whose silent mastery demanded recognition. Noah's betrayal would mark the end of a sibling rivalry built on favoritism. From now on, every metric, every slide, every report would shine like a medal to prove that my value was real and undeniable. That night, I returned to my cabin trailer and closed the door behind me without ceremony. The low hum of the base generator vibrated through the thin walls as flashes of Noah's words replayed in my mind. Stacks of papers, not real action. My uniform, still pressed and spotless, felt suffocating, each ribbon chafing like a reminder of that public trailer. I pressed my back against the door and slid down until I sat on the cold linoleum floor, knees drawn to my chest. Tears pooled behind my eyelids before they spilled, warm and relentless, soaking into the fabric of my blouse. I pressed a trembling hand to my throat, willing my voice not to fracture. My heart hammered in my ears, each beat a brutal insistence that I was alone. The neatly organized binders, the laminated maps, the encrypted flash drives, all the work I had poured myself into seemed meaningless now, reduced to worthless clutter. I traced the edge of the carpet with my fingertip, shivering as memories surfaced. I saw the backyard flames licking at Mom's apron and heard Dad's laugh echoing off the maple trees. I tasted half-baked pumpkin pie drenched in my frustration. I saw my first prototype drone ascend into the sky, my own triumph swallowed by the din of barbecue chatter. I felt again the sting of their indifference, the way they clapped for Noah but turned away from my applause. Guilt and fury warred inside me. How could I feel ashamed for caring so deeply? How could I feel angry at blood? I rocked forward, burying my face in my arms. In the hush, I thought I could hear the mocking laughter of every officer who dismissed me, Lieutenant Carter, Commander Russell, even Captain Walker's silent skepticism after the ceremony. My phone lay abandoned on the desk, still open to the secure channel where I'd uploaded my briefing. My thumb itched to check for messages, to see whether Admiral Walker had responded, but I couldn't bring myself to look. Instead, I closed my eyes and focused on breathing. Inhale for 5, exhale for 7. The count blurred as tears fell, but each breath anchored me to the present. A single flicker of thought pierced the fog. I had a mission to complete. Tomorrow I would stand before an admiral and demand recognition, not for myself, but for every covert operation I'd led. But tonight, I allowed myself to break. I rose unsteadily and crossed to the narrow bunk. The thin mattress sagged under my weight, but I didn't care. I peeled off my uniform blouse and tossed it onto the floor. My skin prickled with the sudden absence of its tightness. I slid under the covers, pulling them over my shoulders like armor, but the chill of the night air seeped through the cracks. I reached for the small photo on my bedside shelf. Noah and me as children, grinning on a sandy shore somewhere our parents dragged us to. We wore matching life jackets and goofy sunglasses. I studied our freckled cheeks, our identical curls, and felt a pang of longing for a time before the division. A whisper escaped my lips. We used to be a team. The tears came again, slower this time, as the weight in my chest began to shift. I realized I had spent years measuring my worth by their reaction, by their applause. But my true measure was in the lives I protected, the threats I diffused before they ever reached a headline. I traced the names of the rescued fishermen I'd guided to safety, recalled the encrypted messages I'd cracked that stopped arms shipments bound for war zones, recalled the pilot whose life depended on my round coordinates. Each memory bolstered me as the tremor in my ribs eased, yet even as the anger ebbed, a humbling ache remained. I reached to the floor and retrieved my uniform blouse, crumpled but intact, and folded it carefully. My fingers lingered on the insignia of a lieutenant, 2 silver bars, symbols of trust and responsibility. I pressed them to my forehead, vowing that I would never let another officer's ignorance diminish the weight of that trust. When I finally closed my eyes, it was not in surrender but in preparation. I pictured the Admiral's office, the polished mahogany desk, the American flag standing sentinel, Admiral Walker's steely gaze. I imagined laying my evidence before him: fuel savings, interdiction success metrics, lives saved, all quantified and undeniable. Each figure would be a testament to the work they had dismissed. Sleep was elusive. I drifted in and out of dreams populated by code fragments and tactical maps. In one dream, I stood on the parade ground and watched Noah's smirk transform into shock as I unrolled a 6-foot-long chart of my accomplishments. In another, I found myself alone at sea, navigating dark waters by star positions, proving that even isolation I could chart a course. At 3:17 a.m., I bolted upright, chest heaving. The generator's hum was gone, replaced by the distant roar of waves on a virtual ocean I'd mapped in simulation. I drew a steadying breath and rolled out of bed. I grabbed my laptop from the desk, its screen prompting me to re-enter my secure credentials. My hands were steady now, fingers resolute. It was time to refine the briefing I had started on the ride back from the ceremony. By 4:02 IDM, I had reorganized the report, highlighted key metrics, and added an executive summary underscoring the strategic impact of my intel work. I attached declassified drone recce imagery and annotated logs of intercepted transmissions. My final point was simple. Without accurate intelligence, every tactical maneuver risked failure. Every stack of paper was the foundation of success. As the first gray light filtered through the blinds, I closed the document and sent it to Admiral Walker's secure inbox. A confirmation tone chimed softly. My muscles ached from tension, but I felt a quiet calm. The tears of betrayal had given way to the clarity of purpose. I stood by the window, watching dawn's glow break across the horizon. I thought of Noah, already asleep somewhere in his quarters, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. I thought of the challenge that lay ahead, to reclaim not only my reputation but the recognition due to every intelligence officer who labored unseen. I touched the insignia on my laptop, an eagle clutching arrows and olive branches, and whispered, "This one's for us." For the first time since the ceremony, I allowed myself a small, determined smile. My collapse had been real and necessary. It stripped away doubts and demands I confront the next day, not as the girl who sought approval, but as Lieutenant Ava Morgan, intelligence officer, strategist, and unwavering guardian of those who could not see the battle behind the scenes. I awoke before dawn, the horizon still ink brick, as I donned my gear. Rear Admiral Christopher Walker had alerted me at 4:30 hours. A civilian cargo vessel had been seized near the Gulf of Aden by Captain Vincent Darkwater Shaw's Blackwell Syndicate. The hostages, 7 merchant mariners and 2 Navy Conterminal and Rallied SEAL Team 3 Sentinel. Our objective: intercept the freighter, neutralize the pirates, and extract the hostages with 0 casualties. By first light, our MiG-60 Seahawk hovered above the darkened water, rotor wash whipping spray against the hull. I crouched beside Chief Petty Officer Ramirez, pointing to infrared signatures on my tablet. See those heat spots 10 meters off the port side? That's likely their boarding skiffs, staged for escape. My team's eyes narrowed as I highlighted GPS coordinates. We'll fast rope on the starboard quarter to bait the diversion, then breach through the forecastle hatch. Within 30 minutes, we were descending cables into the ship's shadow, boots hitting steel with soft thuds. Ramirez and Ensign Clark moved silently to secure the helideck. I sprinted aft with 2-point men, scanning for civilian movement. Inside the cargo hold, my night vision goggles turned the corridor a sickly green. I signaled go and kicked open the hatch. 3 armed pirates spun toward us, AK-47 Sun raised. Contact front, I barked. A quartet of rapid-fire bursts from Chief Petty Officer Lee took down the first 2 pirates. I swung my M4, suppressor settling rounds into the third. The fourth surrendered, dropping his weapon and raising his hands. Hostages this way, I ordered, motioning down a grated stairwell. Below deck, weak voices echoed. 7 sailors huddled in a corner, terror etched on their faces. 2 contractors lay unconscious on stretchers. Move, I commanded. Ensign Clark and Petty Officer Davis secured the hostages in lightweight survival harnesses. I retrieved my tablet and tapped the override code to unlock the main hatch. Helicopter exfil inbound, I called. Outside, the dawn sun glinted off the water as our escort's 2 frigates shifted to intercept Shaw's escape skiffs. But a frantic alarm blared from the bridge above. I sprinted back up the ladder to find Captain Shaw himself, flanked by 4 heavily armed gunmen, aiming RPK machine guns down the corridor. He sneered, breath hot with adrenaline. "You think you can steal my prize?" he growled. I raised my voice over the alarm. "Everyone down. You're outnumbered." Shaw laughed, raising his weapon. I pressed the tactical headset microphone. "Sentinel, on my mark." The team moved. Ensign Clark darted left, slicing the power to overhead lights. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Ramirez lobbed a flashbang. The concussive crack disoriented Shaw's men. In the flicker of my infrared scope, I tracked Shaw's silhouette, raising a pistol. A single round from Petty Officer Lee's suppressed pistol clacked. Shaw dropped, grasping his chest. Within seconds, the remaining gunmen were subdued beneath careful, non-lethal fire. I cuffed Shaw to a cargo rail and radioed, "Target down, hostages secured, prepare for evac in 2 minutes." Overhead, the Seahawk's crew chief reported cleaning up pirates clinging to life rafts. The frigates intercepted the skiffs, recovering 4 additional suspects. Back on deck, I gathered the hostages, checking vital signs. All were stable, one complaining of a sprained ankle. I barked orders to flight medics, directing them to triage. As the pararescue team loaded stretchers, I scanned the horizon. 2 Blackwell gunboats drifting leaderless. Our boarding party had seized the command center before the pirates could scuttle their engines. Moments later, I climbed into the Seahawk, ducking beneath the wounded sun. I removed my helmet and called Walker on secure line. "Admiral, we have 9 safe, 3 KIA. No friendly losses. Target neutralized. Mission success." His voice crackled through the intercom. "Outstanding work, Morgan. Your routing intel and decisive breach saved those lives. Debrief on board the flagship in 4 hours. As we lifted off, the adrenaline coursed through my veins, adrenaline and relief in equal measure. I watched the freighter shrink beneath the chopper's skid until it was no more than a silver dot on endless blue. My team punched forward, pressing on to the next mission as silently as shadows. Later, aboard USS Valor, I presented detailed after-picture slides to a council of admirals. My heat maps and throttle optimization chart showed how I'd rerouted the frigate to intercept Shaw's skiffs 30 minutes before they could signal for reinforcements. The projected fuel cost reduction, $250,000, zero, and lives saved 9 mariners were clear. The council murmured approval. Rear Admiral Walker offered a rear smile. Ava, you just earned a Bronze Star recommendation. That evening, I retreated to the intelligence center, my uniform stained with ash and salt spray. I opened a secure channel back to the Pentagon and forwarded my mission report alongside the piracy network's drifted communications. As I uploaded the files, I felt the spark of purpose rekindle, proof that data and tactics fuse could alter outcomes on the ocean's vast stage. I sent a brief message to the surviving hostages' families, assuring them their loved ones were safe. In the void between commands, I allowed myself a quiet moment of pride. Shaw's operation had been years in the making, his network sprawling across 3 time zones. But in 8 hours, with coordinated intelligence, decisive tactics, and steadfast resolve, SEAL Team 3 Sentinel had shattered his stronghold. I powered down my terminal, rubbing the ache from my shoulders. The base's fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The sting of the ceremony's betrayal felt distant now, replaced by the tangible proof of my worth. Tonight I would draft new routing algorithms for the next patrol, but for now, I savored the calm after the storm, because in that mission, I rediscovered why I chose this career, not for medals or applause, but for moments when a single decision driven by data and resolve could mean the difference between life and death. And that spark of recovery illuminated the path forward, brighter than any spotlight. When Rear Admiral Christopher Walker's secure invitation arrived, I nearly dropped my tablet. The subject line read, "Sentinel Briefing, Operation Sentinel Dawn." I glanced at the time stepper. At next morning, my jaw tightened as I absorbed the gravity. I would present my dossier directly to the Joint Chiefs Intelligence Council. This was no routine debrief. It was an opportunity to redefine my reputation. That evening, I gathered in the briefing room of SEAL Team 3 Sentinel with my new mentor, Commander Elise Whisper Novak, a former cryptologic officer turned tactical advisor. Novak's reputation was legendary. She'd infiltrated an extremist network in the Mediterranean, impersonating a weapons broker for 3 weeks before exposing the entire chain. She'd been reassigned to special projects at the Pentagon, and now she was here to coach me. "Your data is rock solid," Novak said, reviewing my slide deck on the wall-mounted display. The room was dim, lit by the glow of 80 slides outlining fuel savings, threat interdictions, and life safety metrics. But you need a narrative thread. Frame it as a counterpoint to this ceremony snub show, how intel underpins every operational success. She tapped the screen. Slide 17 should segue into your personal testimony. Let the council see your face and hear your conviction. I nodded, heart pounding. We refined the deck. The opening slide now bore a single phrase, "From shadows to spotlight." We rearranged charts so that after each metric, I could tell a story: a life saved, a ship redirected, a network dismantled. Novak coached my tone, measured but charged with purpose. She emphasized pauses after key points to let their weight sink in. Next morning at 500, I donned my service dress blues. Each ribbon, each insignia, now felt earned, not burdensome. I reviewed my notes in the limo en route to the Pentagon, brushing aside any stale echoes of Noah's betrayal. My mind focused on the mission, to turn prejudice into proof. The Joint Chiefs Intelligence Council chamber was imposing vaulted ceilings, dark wood paneling, and the Stars and Stripes standing guard. I entered under stiff protocol, eyes forward, heels clicking on polished marble. Secure phones rang at side tables, aides adjusted earpieces. The council members, 4-star generals, admirals in full regalia, watched as I approached the lectern. I cleared my throat. Good morning, gentlemen and distinguished colleagues. I am Lieutenant Avro Morgan, U.S. Navy Intelligence. Thank you for the opportunity to present Operation Sentinel Dawn. My voice echoed softly. I advanced the clicker. Slide 1. The mission overview. Slide 2. Pirate network map. Slide 3. Fuel optimization curve saving $250,000, 0 cents per engagement. As I navigated through charts and heat mapped, I spoke deliberately. On March 12, our coalition assets faced a multi-vector threat. Without precise intel, the response would have been reactive, measured in minutes rather than seconds. Instead, our interdiction point was 8.7 nautical miles from the convoy's projected path, based on decoded chatter at 2:30 hours. This resulted in interception prior to hostages' relocation, preserving 9 lives. I tapped slide 6, a timeline overlay of transmissions and deployment orders. At slide 8, I paused. The hall was silent but for the hum of projectors. I inhaled and said, "Admiral, if I may speak candidly." Their eyes flicked upward. Curiosity piqued. Earlier this summer, during my brother's commissioning ceremony at Annapolis, I was publicly dismissed as a paper pusher, an insult aimed to diminish the unseen work of intelligence. That moment could have defined me. Instead, it fueled my resolve. A faint murmur rippled through the room. I reset my posture and advanced to slide 9, after-picture photos of hostages boarding rescue helicopters. Each statistic here represents a human life, I continued. Intelligence is not an academic exercise. It is the cornerstone of mission success and life preservation. I clicked to slide 12. Decrypted Blue Force track showing synchronized vessel movements. These aren't abstract lines on a screen. They are courses plotted to save children, merchants, contractors, people with families waiting at home. General Hayes leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Lieutenant," he said, voice gravelly, "your data is impeccable. Your testimony is compelling. What is your request?" I swallowed, then replied, "Recognition that intel must be integrated into operational planning at the strategic level. I propose establishing a permanent intelligence operations liaison embedded within each carrier strike group staff. This would ensure real-time collaboration, reduce planning cycles by an estimated 30%, and enhance force protection." I brought up slide 15, projected cost-benefit analysis, $2,100,000, 0 cents saved annually, casualty risk reduced by 22%. Silence followed as they digested the proposal. The chairman, an admiral whose medals spanned from Desert Storm to present, cracked a smile. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, "your plan is sound, and your presentation was outstanding. We will convene follow-up meetings to implement your liaison program. Your Bronze Star recommendation has been endorsed." The chamber erupted in polite, muted applause. I exhaled, a swell of relief and vindication flooding me. As I shook hands with Deputy Chief Novak, no relation, I realized I'd reclaimed not only my own credibility but championed a structural change, benefiting every intelligence officer. Later, as I exited through the Pentagon Plaza, sunlight streaming across the terrazzo floors, I checked my secure terminal. Admiral Walker's reply blinked. Exceptional. Program endorsed by Chief of Naval Operations. Your liaison pilot begins September 1. Congratulations. I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. That afternoon, I drafted the liaison program charter. Selection criteria, training syllabus, integration protocols, communication standards. I consulted with Commander Novak on mentorship assignments and operational simulations. By evening, the first cohort of 10 intelligence officers was selected. Each received orders stamped with Operation Sentinel Dawn Liaison Pilot. When I finally returned to my quarters, fatigue tugged at my bones, but pride lit my spirit. I updated my personal log. Today, I turned an insult into innovation, a slight into strategy. Intel is no longer confined to briefings, it will shape every horizon. I closed the laptop and gazed at the framed photo of Noah and me on the beach. I whispered, "Thank you, brother. I rose because you tried to hold me down." In the weeks that followed, the liaison pilot embedded on USS Valor and USS Guardian reported seamless coordination. Fuel consumption dropped by an average of 5.3% across 3 exercises. Boarding teams intercepted threats with minutes to spare. I monitored each deployment via secure channel, Nielsen-style dashboards glowing with real-time analytic. Noah sent me a handwritten note. "Proud of you, sis. You've always been the backbone." The penmanship looked uncertain, but sincerity was clear. I filed the note beside my Bronze Star recommendation letter, a testament not only to my mission, but to the journey from overlooked paper pusher to recognized architect of maritime security. Months before Captain Vincent Darkwater Shaw's syndicate struck the freighter near the Gulf of Aden, I uncovered a breadcrumb trail in a declassified dossier labeled Operation Darkwater Campaign. Analysts had buried references to a private maritime security firm coded Blackwell Maritime that retrofitted a former research vessel with 2 Little Bird helicopters and a counterintelligence suite. The MacArthur, purchased for a reported $300,000, 0 cents, then upgraded at a cost eclipsing $2,400,000, 0 cents, served as Shaw's nerve center for coordinating pirate skiffs across 3 time zones. A leaked internal email from Quartermaster detailed shipment schedules in encrypted 7-digit color codes. Line items included blue 143, comms relay upgrade, red 271, boarding team rotation, and green 590, hostage transfer blueprint. One excerpt read, "Exfil point will shift to 28.5 DEGN, 52.3 DT at 300 hours local secure channels only." That message, found on a flash drive recovered in a raid on a Cuban safe house, exposed the syndicate's standard operating procedure. Move fast, leave no paper trail, and rely on offshore shell companies to launder proceeds. I cross-referenced those coordinates against AIS satellite pings and discovered a pattern. Every month, the MacArthur shadowed merchant convoys along the Gulf's choke points, deploying reconnaissance drones at dawn to map vulnerable hull breaches. Heat maps from our own infrared satellites showed distinct thermal signatures matching the MacArthur's reinforced landing pads and retractable drone bays. Analysts estimated the syndicate moved $4,700,000, 0 cents, in illicit cargo monthly, under this cover. Further insight came when a former Blackwell maritime intelligence officer turned whistleblower provided testimony under oath to a Pentagon inquiry. He confirmed that Shaw's network used civilian contractor credentials to bypass port security in Dubai and Djibouti. He described coded radio transmissions at 27.88 milliquay frequency the pirates believed was invisible to naval SIGINT arrays. Armed with that information, our team retrofitted mothballed ELINT buoys and reactivated them in the Gulf, intercepting the next transmission and triangulating Shaw's position within 12 hours. That side story, Operation Darkwater's secret maritime logistics, illuminated how a few envelopes of encrypted data and some off-the-books vessel modifications could sustain a global pirate syndicate for years. In the final raid, those insights helped us pinpoint the MacArthur's clandestine dock in Bahrain and seize Shaw's command codes, effectively dismantling Blackwell Maritime's Gulf Wall network. 6 weeks after Operation Sentinel dawn, I stood outside the federal courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia, as Captain Vincent Darkwater Shaw was escorted into the building. The tabloids had dubbed it the trial of the Pirate King, but I knew better. Shaw was no romantic rogue, just a ruthless smuggler, hiding behind a veneer of maritime security. I had flown in early that morning, determined to see justice done for the hostages we had rescued. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers in crisp suits whispered at the defense table. Reporters clicked cameras from the gallery. Families of the 9 rescued mariners huddled together, holding framed photos of their loved ones. I took a seat in the front row, my uniformed silver bars and bronze star ribbon drawing muted glances, and reviewed the timelines on my tablet. Each clip of intercepted radio chatter, each infrared heat map of the MacArthur's hidden helipad, every decrypted email excerpt was laid out like pieces of evidence against Shaw. When Prosecutor Grant called me to the stand, I felt the old surge of focus. Under oath, I recounted our seizure, the hourly position updates I broadcast, the fast rope drop coordinates I calculated the moment Shaw raised his RPK at the forecastle hatch. I described how his men had mouthed surrender, but then attempted to trigger a panic charge. I exclaimed the flashbang deployment sequence that neutralized them without friendly casualties. The jury scribbled notes. Defense counsel shifted uncomfortably. That afternoon, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts: piracy, hostage-taking, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Shaw's face, chalk pilot awe, lips twitching in fury, bore the weight of sentences totaling 112 years. As the bailiff led him away, I felt a bitter satisfaction. The sea was safer now, his network unraveled by every stack of papers I had once been accused of hiding behind. Outside the courthouse, I joined the families for a press line. Reporters thrust microphones at me. I emphasized the importance of integrated intelligence and tactical collaboration. I spoke of the Operation Sentinel Dawn liaison pilot, the program I had proposed at the Pentagon that was already embedding officers on carrier strike groups. Every life saved, I said, was proof that covert work deserved equal footing with frontline heroics. Later that evening, I flew back to Annapolis for a private ceremony at the Naval Academy Chapel. It wasn't publicized, no brass band or press corps, but it meant more to me. Rear Admiral Michael Thompson pinned my new rank on my uniform. Commander Morgan. Backdated to the day of brief the Joint Chiefs. The weight of the oak leaf on my shoulder was profound, an emblem not just of personal promotion, but of institutional. The chapel's stained glass windows cast jeweled patterns on polished pews. My parents sat together, heads bowed. Noah knelt beside them, eyes red but proud. After the service, I hugged Susan first. She whispered, "I'm sorry it took so long to see." David grasped my shoulders, voice thick. "You earned every bit of this." Noah wrapped me in a fierce bro hug and murmured, 2 days later, I received the sentencing memorandum from the Navy's Judge Advocate General. Shaw's assets were forfeited, his Blackwell Maritime Holding Company shuttered. Documents showed over $12,800,000, 0 cents, seized from shell accounts linked to arms shipments. I scanned the list. Logistics invoices, encrypted manifest logs, offshore trust in Cyprus, on all rendered meaningless by our intelligence network. At dusk, I returned to the Academy's parade field, now empty, columns glowing amber in the setting sun. I stood at the spot where, year ago, I had watched Noah's ceremony from the periphery. Now I stood in the center, uniform pressed, rank shining. No envelope had fallen, no public sneer awaited. Instead, I lifted my gaze to the crumbling granite steps and whispered, "This is for the ones you left in darkness, the lives you gambled for profit." My phone buzzed, a secure message from Rear Admiral Walker. "Excellent work. Liaison program expands to Europe next quarter." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji, formal enough, yet personal. As I walked away, the columns receded behind me like ghosts of past doubts. I carried with me the final proof that the unseen work of intelligence was as vital as any charge across a deck. Shaw's downfall was complete. Convicted. Half a year had slipped by since Captain Vincent Darkwater Shaw was sentenced to 112 years behind bars, and as I drove up the familiar gravel driveway of my childhood home in Annapolis, the afternoon sun glinted off the columns of the Morgan residence. I parked my SUV beneath the maple tree that still bore carved initials from our youth. A heart's end faded into the wood and carried my duffel bag toward the front door. Taking a slow breath, I reminded myself that this visit was not just homecoming, it was the final step in closing the chapter that began with my brother's commissioning ceremony and had wound its way through betrayal, redemption, and strategic vindication. Inside, the living room was bright with late afternoon light. David and Susan Morgan sat on the leather couch, faces lined by both age and anticipation. Noah, now an ensign in dress blues, perched on the edge of the armchair, hands clasped in his lap. On the coffee table, cinnamon rolls, my mother's steadfast ritual, sat steaming in a silver platter. I set down my duffel and offered a tentative smile. "Hi," I said simply. My voice felt both heavy and hopeful. My mother rose first, clutching my shoulders. "Welcome home, Ava," she whispered, eyes glistening. My father nodded, his usual stoicism softened by pride. Noah stood as well, clearing his throat. "Lieutenant Morgan," he began with a half-smile that stole formality. "Or should I say, Commander Morgan." He stood straighter, gaze meeting mine. "Congratulations on your promotion." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," I replied, "and thank you for wanting to learn." He nodded, recalling the day he'd asked me for heat map tutorials. "I've been through the first module," he said, "and I've already shared some insights with my tactical team. They actually asked me for more data next week." A gentle laugh escaped me. "That sounds like progress." I turned to my parents. I wanted us to talk about what we learned this year about recognition, value, and the meaning of service. I gestured toward the couch, and they settled. The room smelled of sweet dough and fresh brewed coffee. I began. At my brother's commissioning ceremony, I felt sidelined, dismissed as a paper pusher. I let that sting define me for too long, until a piracy mission and a Pentagon briefing showed me otherwise. I realized that every report I write, every chart I build, every encrypted transmission I crack, all those stacks of papers are lifelines for sailors and mariners in danger. My mother dabbed at her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was so caught up celebrating Noah's achievements that I never saw yours." My father's voice trembled as he spoke. "I cheered the loudest for him, but we should have cheered for you too. I'm proud of the intelligence program you built." Noah leaned forward. "You taught me that frontline action depends on what happens before you reach the deck. I used one of your risk matrix models and our latest drill cut our response time by 27 seconds. That's huge. I felt a swell of emotion. That's exactly it. Success at sea isn't just muscle and adrenaline. It's planning, foresight, data. Those seconds you shaved off could save lives in real scenarios. My mother passed me a cinnamon roll. We want to make amends, she said, so we've set up the garage as a mini lab for your liaison pilot's training. We've even cleared a corner for your prototype drones. I smiled, touched. I'd love that, and I'd like you all to join the first session, learn the basics of Intel-driven operations. It'll be more fun than you think. Dinner flowed into evening as we shared stories. My father's renewed interest in cryptologic puzzles, my mother's experiment with low-smoke baking, far superior to her pumpkin pie debacle, and Noah's plans for a joint exercise integrating SEAL teams and Intel liaisons. We laughed over childhood misadventures, mud pie battles under the oak tree, secret missions in the sandbox, and marvel at how far we'd come. Later, as dusk settled over the porch, I stood at the threshold, my family gathered behind me. Noah stepped up beside me and laid a hand on my shoulder. "Thanks for coming home," he said, his voice earnest. "And thanks for showing us all what it means to serve." I drew him into a hug, then embraced my parents in turn. The porch light cast long shadows, and I breathed in the scent of honeysuckle. "Home," I whispered, "truly is where understanding grows." As I climbed into my SUV, I looked back at the softly lit windows. My journey from overlooked lieutenant to recognized commander, and from a sister betrayed to a family reconciled, had reached its resolution. The lessons were clear. Value isn't defined by applause, but by impact. Recognition often comes late, but is most powerful when it's shared, and the strongest bonds are forged through empathy and shared purpose. With the engine running, I sent a secure message to Rear Admiral Walker. "Everything set. Liaison training starts Monday. My family is on board." A confirmation blinked back. "Outstanding. See you at 800, Commander." I exhaled, letting the weight of the past months fall away. The road ahead stretched into the night, horizon aglow with possibility. And for the first time, I felt that my story built on silent victories, hard-won trust, and unwavering resolve had found its true ending. Intelligence would no longer be relegated to shadows, and the Morgan family would stand united in recognition of the unseen work that makes every mission possible.